Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer slammed the Liberal government, saying whoever the Liberals choose as their next leader, nothing will change. Political columnist Brian Lilley is back, discussing who some of the frontrunners are to replace Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. And BCN's Naveen Day will have details on how to help you keep your New Year's fitness resolutions.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Fresh off the announcement that Justin Trudeau is stepping down as Prime Minister and Liberal leader, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer says nothing will change when the next leader of the Liberals is chosen. He says that includes two of the top contenders, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland.
He is currently Justin Trudeau's chair of his economic task force. He is one of the main architects of Trudeau's record. He loves the carbon tax so much that he was even fighting against any exemptions being given to Canadians struggling with home heating costs. He supports all of Justin Trudeau's policies. He was one of the key architects of this Liberal administration. Chrystia Freeland was there all along the way, applauding and cheering and voting in favor all of Justin Trudeau's policies that doubled housing costs, that drove up inflation and interest rates, that let dangerous and repeat offenders out on the streets, prioritizing the rights of criminals ahead of the rights of law-abiding Canadians. And she was even prepared to blow through her already insane $40 billion deficit guardrail right up until the moment that she was told that she would be demoted right afterwards.
You know, when it comes to choosing the next Liberal leader, it appears as though you don't even have to be a Canadian citizen to vote. That's according to Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, who says as long as you're 14 or older, you can vote for who our next Prime Minister will be.
You could have teenagers from China. You could have seniors visiting from India. You know, they show something with their name on a piece of mail, and they're going to vote. You could have people organizing from all kinds of countries. Russia. You could have backers of Hamas organizing. People who are not citizens and couldn't vote will help pick the new PM.
Mr. Lilley will also discuss if any of the opposition leaders would be willing to back the new Liberal leader. He'll have details coming up in the second half of our program. Alberta lawyer Leighton Gray and David Lees from the Frontier Centre for Public Policy also chimed in about the Trudeau government proroguing Parliament. Now, during a Return to Reason episode on YouTube, they both said it was a selfish move by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
In terms of operating government, we don't need to have a Prime Minister. The Liberal Party can carry on without a leader temporarily. They can do all that stuff. We don't have to shut down the country for, 8.5 weeks while this goes on. So my question is, why did the Governor General do it, given that it doesn't seem to benefit anyone except the Liberals? What do you think?
No, I think it's a very fair question. Having said that, I think the Governor General would probably look at their mandate in a fairly narrow, practical term and say, well, the Prime Minister asked for this, so technically I'm going to respond, and I'm going to say yes to proroguing the Parliament.
Make sure you catch the full conversation with Leighton Gray and David Lees on the Return to Reason YouTube channel. Premier Danielle Smith says she wants a federal election sooner rather than later. She says it's irresponsible and selfish for Justin Trudeau to prorogue Parliament until March 24th and stay on as Prime Minister until a replacement is found. Now, when it comes to reflecting on Justin Trudeau's legacy on the energy industry, Smith says Trudeau could have done so much more to help our country outside of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion.
We could have, with federal leadership, potentially got Energy East built. Part of the reason they pulled the plug on that was that they couldn't see a way through to the finish line, even though they'd spent $1 billion. We could have already been well underway with a Northern Gateway, which would be, I think, the most significant egress from our country, exporting off the coast of British Columbia. We could have, with greater leadership, potentially had the Prime Minister make a case for Keystone XL, which would have been well on the way to getting the largest producer of heavy oil attached to the largest production or refining capacity in the Gulf Coast, and that none of that happened.
Well, this is Christmas Day for Orthodox Christians around the globe. For many who follow the Apostolic, Orthodox, and Eastern faiths, it's a day to celebrate Jesus' birthday. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, with all of the snow we still have here in Lethbridge, it does kind of feel a little like Christmas.
Well, I would agree with you on that, Hal, especially because I still have my Christmas decorations up at home. Yeah, that's right. I'm one of those. I usually keep it up through the Ukrainian Christmas, which it is today, which actually we should do a poll question with our viewers and have them weigh in. When is the appropriate time to take down your Christmas decorations? Is it right after Christmas, December 26th? You're one of those that takes them down. Is it New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, or well into the new year like me? I don't know what the right answer is, so it'd be interesting to know. Personally, I don't think it's a New Year's Eve party without a Christmas tree, but that's just me. New Year's is still part of the holiday. But weather-wise, yes, you're right. It looked more like Christmas today than actually Christmas did because we had a brown Christmas this year. Today, nice and white. Not for long, though, because look at these temperatures. We're going to be rising up into the +5 by tomorrow. And by Wednesday, expect some showers instead of snow. I'll be back later in the show with that full 7-day forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Health experts are urging China to share infection data following an outbreak of the HMPV virus, which has spread across 4 countries. The virus that causes cold or flu-like symptoms has seen cases spike across northern China, particularly among young children. Many are comparing the situation similar to the COVID-19 outbreak. So far, the virus has been detected in China, but has also spread to India, Malaysia, and Kazakhstan. India's health minister said HMPV's occurrence in India is not new and that there was no reason to worry despite increased testing. A powerful earthquake rocked the foothills near the Himalayas in Tibet on Tuesday, killing at least 126 people and injuring close to 200 others. Emergency officials say around 1,000 homes were also damaged when the 7.1 magnitude quake hit around 9:05 local time. Chinese President Xi Jinping says search and rescue efforts are well underway as are attempts to resettle the affected people. More than 1,500 local firefighters and rescue workers have been dispatched to the affected region. Around 22,000 items, including tents, coats, quilts, and folding beds, were also sent to the Shagatsi region. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump says he will not rule out the use of military force to seize control of the Panama Canal and Greenland. He says the United States needs control of both regions for American national security.
We need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military. I'm not going to commit to that now. It might be that you'll have to do something. Look, the Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. And we gave the Panama Canal to Panama. We didn't give it to China. And they've abused it. They've abused that gift. It should have never been made, by the way.
Mr. President, back on Greenland, your position is clear, but have you directed your staff to take specific actions to draw plans? And can you elaborate again? You didn't rule out military coercion.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. You have approximately 45,000 people there. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world.
Bridge City News has received a lot of feedback from viewers like yourself that you haven't received a lot of mail or parcels since the Canada Post strike ended. Well, Canada Post provided an update regarding their services on Tuesday. Officials say they're finally back up to full service for all domestic parcels. In a statement, Canada Post also say that they've stabilized their operations and are continuing to work through higher volumes of mail. On-time service guarantees have resumed for domestic parcels, but Canada Post says that customers should still expect delays by several days for international deliveries. Now, despite this, the U.S. Postal Service announced Monday that they're resuming mail deliveries to Canada after the month-long strike by Canada Post workers late last month. The cold weather could be a difficult time for many homeless people to find warmth and safety, but in some past instances, efforts to shelter oneself has often seen fatal results. As BCN's Landon Hickok explains now, an Alberta judge is appealing to the provincial government to review and approve new safety measures to prevent injury and death from people climbing inside of clothing donation bins.
It's as deadly as it is enticing. Clothing donation bins set up across cities in Alberta, especially here in Lethbridge, are used by people to donate their unwanted clothing to people needing it the most. But in some cases, what's used as a lifeline for the most vulnerable would end up costing their lives. Justice Jamie Williams is asking the Alberta government to review and consider adding more safety measures to donation bins set up across Alberta. Between 2017 and 2019, she reviewed multiple cases of accidental deaths that resulted from individuals climbing into these bins. The typical cause of death of these cases involves suffocation and serious cuts to the neck. Cam Kissick of Streets Alive in Lethbridge gave reasons to why people would choose to go through the bins rather than make their way to a proper shelter.
It could be an after-hours situation where organizations like ours are closed and they can't necessarily get to them to get the clothing and they require it. The other could be ease. They might be in that location. In Lethbridge here, we're not exactly close to where the bins are. So if they are in that area, it could be challenging to get here instead of staying there.
This doesn't mean that safety measures were implemented in the past. Diabetes Canada, which manages clothing donation bins across the country, said in a statement to Bridge City News, in 2019, all National Diabetes Trust clothing donation bins across Canada were modified for improved safety. National Diabetes Trust, the textile donation operations for Diabetes Canada, welcomes the recommendations made by Justice Jamie Williams and is pleased to see that NDT's actions to improve bin safety and their recommendation made during the inquiry to remove mechanisms from existing bins that would create pinch points was included in Justice Williams' final report. A letter has been sent along by Alberta Justice to Municipal Affairs, highlighting safety recommendations for clothing donation bins set up across the province. Municipal Affairs say they are reviewing this report and are committed to the health and safety of all Albertans. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
Well, it's a new year, and that means new projects to develop and, of course, new blessings. Streets Alive mission began the year here in Lethbridge with a takeover and demolition and remodeling of what will be the new building of its mission site, which is operating from downtown Lethbridge. Kent Kissick, Streets Alive mission and co-founder, explains what services the organization will offer from the new building once construction is completed.
So this building will house what we call our mission services. That includes our pin bank, our trusteeship, our resource, and we'll be able to actually have a drop-in center here where there'll be bathrooms, access to bathrooms, telephone, charging stations to charge up their phones. The pin bank is where we provide clothing. The place where we do haircuts, medical, Foot Friday, paramedics will be part of this. And then in the back end of the building, we're going to have our repurpose center, which is where everybody brings clothing and furniture donations for us to give back out to people that are being rehoused, working with immigrants and those kinds of people that need free items. We're going to be able to eliminate about $350,000 in lease payments, which can go directly into programming. We look forward to being able to increase our volunteer base and be able to partner with the agencies in the area that are providing service to the most vulnerable of our community. We came, we prayed, they wandered through the building, so we're looking for direction.
We are a Christ-focused mission. Everything we do is by His will, and as such, we feel it's important that He is here, and we wanted to bring the presence of Him to this facility before we even started. Renovations have started. They started in the demo. I'm hesitant to say we're going to be in by this date because construction is one of those things, but we will be in 2025.
Officials with Streets Alive mission say they exist to provide for the physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs of many. They also say they empower people to change the lives of many through the gospel of Jesus Christ. You know, with New Year's resolutions and hitting the gym, it's important to find a habit that really works for you so you can stick to your workout plan. In this next story, BCN's Naveen Day visited a fitness trainer to try out some gym equipment and melt away some of the dad bod.
The start of the new year is typically the time when people make New Year's resolutions, and a big New Year's resolution is I'm going to go get in shape. I'm going to shed off some weight, lose the dad bod, and a lot of people get gym memberships. But do we always stick to that habit of going to the gym? Well, my guest here is going to talk just about that. I'm here with Jared Carberry. He's a personal trainer at Gym in the North here in Lethbridge, and he's going to talk about how to keep your 2025 fitness resolutions. Jared, what can we do? How do we keep engaged and keep working out?
I mean, there's many different ways. You're going to hear a billion different strategies. The one I find the most success with that I like to employ with most of my clients is choosing habits rather than a goal. So you nailed it on the head saying lots of people, I'm going to shed the weight, get rid of the dad bod, whatever it is. We get fixated on a number and we only can see that number. So instead of choosing a number that's the ideal one, I would advise a client, let's talk about your habits instead.
And another problem people have is they show up at the gym, they're extremely motivated, but they have no direction. And so they may either overdo it or they may underdo it and not get the results. So we got some gear around here. Why don't you just give me a demonstration of what someone can do if they want to do some self-led exercise.
Right. So something that I would have you start on is maybe just an overhead press. Very simple. Okay. So we would just start with something nice and easy, like some 10-pound weights for you.
Okay, let's do this together.
Yes.
Okay, what are we doing?
So from here, I would get you to start here. Okay. We're just going to think fully extending, reaching, pushing through the roof, extending those shoulders as straight up as we can. And then we just come down, keeping tension to about that chin line. Okay. We don't need to come down to where we're resting and losing that tension. And then we're just going to go again.
All right, what is this thing?
So I know it looks big and intimidating and scary to look at from a distance, right? The nice thing about cable machines like this is if you chose to, you could do your absolute entire full workout here and not be limited at all. Okay, I would get you to grab one on each hand, and then I'm gonna get you to take a step towards me, bring those weights down to your chest. It's very hard from there, right? So this is a good learning point. So now before we walk forward, we're gonna get you to bring those weights down to your mid-chest line. Now you're gonna take a step forward. Okay. Keeping those there, okay? Then from here, I want you to step 1 foot forward. We're gonna think keeping our chest nice and tall, and then we're gonna open up those arms, keep a slight bend in those elbows to where we feel comfortable, and then we're gonna squeeze like we're giving somebody a big old bear hug and really focus on squeezing that chest.
Oh, I can feel it in my chest.
Just nice and easy.
Yeah, up in the shoulders
exactly.
Here too. And for busy people, how much time should you be spending at a gym, and what frequency should you be working out?
Yeah, it's a great question. So out of the gate, right, obviously more is always going to be better, but for busy people, it's not always an option or you're crunched for time. Any workout is going to be better than a workout you didn't do.
Jared Carberry is a fitness instructor here at Gym in the North in Lethbridge. Jared, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Naveen. It was great to be here.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
While many people think about making resolutions to improve the physical body, what about our spiritual bodies? Now, in the Bible, the Apostle Paul says in 1 Timothy 4:8, physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. Pastor Kelly Stickle is the lead pastor for Parallel Church here in Lethbridge. He says we really need to focus on training our spirit by reading the Bible, praying, and gathering with other believers.
And the reason why I believe the scripture that you brought up is so key is because doing that discipline is and saying, okay, I'm going to change my behaviors. That's behavior modification, and it's good. And I think it's necessary for us to do better behaviors, but it's way more sustainable to work on our heart first. So that if we work on what's inside, what is going to happen outside is naturally going to occur. So if we just modify our behaviors, that's going to last for a season. I recommend for people in our church and saying New Year's resolutions are good, but what if we focused on retraining our heart and our mind? And what if we focused on reading scriptures and do that? Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. We can build that faith on the inside, build our faith. Jesus said, hey, if you're going to face storms this coming year, the best way is to, hear and obey the teachings of Christ. So if we focus on our spiritual selves and reading the word ourselves and building our spiritual life out of that is going to come a much more sustainable outcome rather than just modifying a behavior or two.
According to Faith Tides, the Forbes Health One survey found the average New Year's resolution lasts just under 4 months. And my New Year's resolution, not to shovel so much snow this year. Well, we had sunshine mixed with clouds earlier today, not a lot of snow, but more clouds may be moving into our region, along with the potential of showers. Full weather details are on deck. Well, it was mainly clear earlier today here in Lethbridge, but it looks like more cloud cover along with some moisture may be on the way. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, with the warmer temperatures, the moisture may look more like rain as opposed to snow?
Yep, nothing like a nice January shower to get us in the mood for spring, because that's exactly what we can expect on Wednesday. So not snow, we're going to be seeing some showers, 60% chance of showers there with a lovely 5-degree temperature day. Also some wind, so expect up to 60K winds, 40 to 60K throughout the day there, and then diminishing a little bit later on. Clear skies though on Thursday, high of 0, and then Friday we are back to some showers there, 7 for the high, and then a couple of zeros as we get into the weekend. Saturday and Sunday, mainly cloudy skies, and then partly cloudy skies next Monday with a high of 2 degrees. So we're well above seasonal, because as you can see, these seasonal temperatures, the averages are dropping, but we seem to be going higher in Lethbridge. So -2, the average low, -14, the average, the -2, the average high for this time of year, -14, the average low. 12 degrees was our record high on this day, happening back in 1914 and in 1909. The chilliest on record, which was -41 for Lethbridge. Very cold indeed. Okay, so sunrise, we're seeing a minute earlier than we did yesterday, so at 8:27, and 4:49 today is the sunset. 2 minutes later than it was yesterday. So that means 3 minutes more daylight today than we saw yesterday. 8 hours, 22 minutes in total. Days are getting longer. See, I told you that spring was coming. So we've got a couple of 8s here on the coast. Victoria, mainly cloudy skies tomorrow. Vancouver seeing a 30% chance of morning drizzle there. And then in Edmonton, mix of sun and cloud, high of 3, high of 5 tomorrow in Calgary. And Calgary seeing a 30% chance of morning showers there as well. Okay, as we get to the rest of the prairies here, 1 for the high in Saskatoon, mainly clear skies there, mainly cloudy skies in Regina, -1 for the high and -9 in Winnipeg with a mix of sun and cloud there. As we look to the rest of actually the central part of the country here, we're seeing some clearing skies in Toronto, -9 for the high, -12 in Ottawa with a 60% chance of flurries, partly cloudy skies with some periods of snow there, -10 for the high in Montreal. As we look to Fredericton, we're going to be seeing a 60% chance of flurries there with a high of -3. Halifax, mix of sun and cloud, -2 there. Some flurries expected in Charlottetown tomorrow, -1 and 1 degree for the high in St. John's with a mix of sun and clouds. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The federal government says the Canada Revenue Agency will skip parliamentary approval and continue to collect the capital gains tax. Parliament was prorogued until March 24th as the Liberal Party undergoes a leadership race. The Finance Department is arguing parliamentary convention allows taxation proposals to go into effect once the government tables a notice of Ways and Means motion. The Liberals tabled the motion in September that introduced the bill, which is meant to raise the portion of capital gains tax that companies pay from 1/2 to 2/3. The CRA, however, says it will stop the policy if Parliament resumes, and the government says it will no longer proceed with the proposed changes to capital gains taxation. WestJet has been legally ordered to hand over all of its files on harassment of flight attendants in a class action lawsuit alleging widespread misconduct by its pilots. A BC Supreme Court judges ruled the country's second-largest airline has been slow and potentially adversarial regarding the documents, and it's unclear why complaint files haven't been produced in a timely manner. The lawsuit filed in 2016 alleges WestJet breached flight attendants' contracts by breaking a promise to provide a harassment-free workplace. WestJet has 45 days to turn over the additional files regarding all harassment complaints during the class period from April of 2014 through February of 2021. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 69 points today to 24,929. The Dow was also down 178 points to 42,528. The S&P 500 was down 66 points to 5,909, and the Nasdaq was also down 375 points to 19,489. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 88 cents to $74.44 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 26 cents to $3.45 US. Gold was down 12.18 to 26.4829 US an ounce, and silver was up 9 cents to $30.03 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.43 per bushel, barley is at $6.65, canola is at $14.15, and corn is at $8.10 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was up 38 cents to $195.58. Feeder cattle were down 150 to 260.53, and lean hogs February contract was up 28 cents to 81.03. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours and sits at 69.60 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Premier Danielle Smith says she wants a federal election sooner rather than later. The Alberta Premier says it is irresponsible and selfish for Justin Trudeau to pause Parliament and stay on as Prime Minister until a replacement is found. Sun political columnist Brian Lilley has some thoughts on the Trudeau resignation announcement and who more of the frontrunners are to replace Trudeau as Prime Minister. He'll share those thoughts with us in just a few moments. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. As you've heard on Bridge City News, Justin Trudeau announced that he will be stepping down as both Prime Minister and Liberal leader once a new leader is picked by his party. Now, many believe this puts Canada in a bad position. You can include Sun political columnist Brian Lilley in that group. Mr. Lilley joins us now from beautiful Palm Springs, California, on a bit of a holiday. Now, Brian, you believe that since Trudeau is on his way out, this creates a lot of uncertainty for Canada.
Absolutely. And, as you mentioned, I'm down here in the States, picked a bad time to be away, thought I was going to be able to work quietly down here. And then the Prime Minister goes and resigns. It made the front page of the Desert Sun newspaper here. It's been all over the talk shows on American TV. They're noticing, and not noticing in a great way, I might add. Justin Trudeau could have, decided to leave 6 months ago. He could have, at the end of the session before the summer break, he could have said, you know what, I've had a good run, I'm going to step down. Well, I'm not doing well in the polls. He could have decided, you know what, if I'm going to go up against Donald Trump, I need to call an election, and called an election, which I think would have been the right move. He did none of those. He put us in the worst possible spot. He announced that he's resigning, but he hasn't resigned yet. He'll resign when they pick a new Liberal leader, but we don't know when that is. Will it be before they return on March 24th? Possibly, but that would be a very fast leadership race for a national party that is in disarray. So we don't know when there will be a new leader. We don't know when there will be a new prime minister. And Donald Trump, of course, gets sworn in less than 2 weeks now. He's promised those 25% tariffs. He's making fun of Justin Trudeau, calling him governor, saying Canada should be the 51st state. How does anyone negotiate with Justin Trudeau or Canada? Who speaks for Canada? Hal, it could be 6 months or more before we have a functional government in this country, and we're facing an economic crisis.
Now, Brian, even though millions of Canadians are wanting a change in government, you say some of the opposition parties could back the new Liberal leader once Parliament resumes, maybe the end of March. Now, what have Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, and Yves-François Blanchet said on the issue?
Well, they've all said that they're going to vote the government down. And so Parliament resumes March 24th. There's going to be at least 2, possibly 3 confidence votes that week. You don't have to have a confidence vote on the speech from the throne. So on the first day, we'll get a speech from the throne. They don't even need to vote on it ever. But if they do, that's a confidence vote. There's going to be the spending bill because the government runs out of money on March 31st. And so they have to vote supplies so that government can continue to operate. That will be a confidence vote. And according to the parliamentary calendar, the Conservatives have to have an opposition day, and that will be a confidence vote. We know they're going to put up a motion of non-confidence. Yves-François Blanchet said very much the same as Pierre Poilievre. This changes nothing. Blanchet was pretty blunt. He said it's the same people, the same policies, the same ideology. Forget it, we need an election. Jagmeet Singh's the weakest link here. He has backed the Liberals many times, including voting confidence 8 times after ripping up his coalition agreement. He has said that he will vote, no matter what the vote of confidence is, he will back it and vote to take the government down. But can he be trusted? I'm not so sure. We're going to have to wait and see on that one. If they do vote the government down, by the way, then we're into an election. Minimum 37 days. That takes us into early May. Takes a while after an election for a new government to be sworn in, for cabinet to be appointed, for them to figure out where the bathroom is, never mind what their file is. That's why I'm saying we may not have a functional government until June. Or quite frankly, if the Liberals somehow find a way to keep this going until October, when the election is scheduled for, are the Americans really going to take a lame duck administration seriously? Kevin O'Leary's already down in Mar-a-Lago saying you shouldn't.
Now, you and I recently touched on the possible contenders to replace Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister and Liberal leader. Any more who are thinking of potentially putting their names in the hat?
Well, Christy Clark, apparently, we talked about her on Monday. Christy Clark apparently had a conference call with 100 different organizers on Monday night. That is impressive. She's got Don Guy behind her. He's a Toronto-based Liberal who is, has great experience in organizing leadership campaigns and helping to run provincial and national election campaigns. So that's impressive. Mark Carney's just saying he's thinking about it. Chrystia Freeland, she's getting former Liberal MPs, people like Paul Zed behind her from the Chrétien Martin era. So everyone is now jockeying for position, and Mark Carney put out a statement saying, he's thankful for the messages of support and he's thinking about it. Are we going to see Anita Anand jump in? I don't think it matters. She's not going to be a candidate of any serious note. There's some people that think the world of her, but she has no name recognition and she does not have the political chops, in my view. Dominic LeBlanc, absolutely, he's thinking about it. He's been Trudeau's fixer, used to be his babysitter. Some say he was until recently, until Trudeau announced his resignation, that he was still the PM's babysitter. So all these names are going into a hat. But the polling shows, whether it's Nick Nanos or the Angus Reid Institute, doesn't matter who's leading the Liberal ship. Right now, if any of them went up against Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives would win in a cakewalk.
Brian, we found out recently during the foreign interference inquiry that teenagers from other nations who were not even citizens of Canada were voting in Liberal candidate nomination races. Now, do those same rules apply when the Liberal Party is choosing its next leader and the Prime Minister of Canada?
They do, and it's utterly insane how. We could have, in the case of the Han Dong nomination back in 2019, the one that was talked about at the foreign interference inquiry, high school and college kids from China were bussed in to vote for Dong at the request or insistence of the Chinese consulate in Toronto. If China is going to go to the bother of interfering in a nomination race for a safe Liberal seat for a guy who's never going to be put into cabinet, what do you think they're going to do when the prime ministership of a G7 is up for grabs? So the Liberal rules don't require you to be a citizen of Canada to vote. They don't require you to be 18. None of the rules that apply for voting in a general election to choose the government apply here, but these people can all vote to choose the next prime minister through the Liberal leadership race. You just need to be 14 years of age and ordinarily reside in the riding. What does that mean? It's very vague. So yeah, you could have teenagers from China, you could have seniors visiting from India. They show something with their name on a piece of mail and they're going to vote. You could have people organizing from all kinds of countries, Russia. You could have backers of Hamas organizing. People who are not citizens and couldn't vote will help pick the new PM. We really need to change the rules around all the parties. The NDP is a little bit better. The Conservatives are a bit better than them. The Liberals have the loosest rules going, and right now they're the governing party. So it's open season for foreign interference in choosing our next prime minister.
Wow, incredible. Brian, you and I touched a bit about Donald Trump and the incoming U.S. president. He's been trolling Trudeau and many Canadians saying that Canada, should be the 51st state. Now, Doug Ford, meanwhile, made a counter proposal to purchase Alaska and Minnesota. A little tongue-in-cheek comment on CNN by the Ontario Premier.
Yeah, he was trying to point out the ridiculousness of Trump saying become the 51st state. Most Canadians don't want it. I think regardless of political stripe, you would find that people would be saying, no, we don't want that. We've been an independent nation for well over a century. We want to stay that way. But my wish for Ford is that if he's going to start suggesting states that we take over, can he pick a warm one so that we have a place to go to, like where I am now, to escape in the winter? He suggested Alaska and Minnesota, two of the coldest places in the United States. So I would prefer, Florida, California, Texas. Somewhere warm. Let's go for that route. But yeah, it's not a serious proposal from Ford. Unfortunately, it's still just him and Danielle Smith out there speaking for Canada. I thought that Danielle Smith put it very well in her reaction to Justin Trudeau's resignation. This is an incredibly selfish act and puts us in this horrible position. That was a great summary.
Brian, businessman and TV personality Kevin O'Leary met with Donald Trump recently, as you mentioned earlier, pushing for a union of Canada and the United States. But you say he's not really pushing the idea of Canada joining the United States. Why not?
So, a lot of people are getting angry at O'Leary and saying, how dare he say he speaks for Canada? Why is he trying to sell us? What he's actually talking about is that European Union style model, where you've got common borders, and once you're inside Fortress North America, then you're inside Fortress North America. We've got that we would have a common economic model. Look, I am not a fan of the European Union. I like the idea of them having their trading bloc, but it has become much more than that. The European Union now supersedes national legislatures. And that's part of the reason that Britain broke away, the creep of the European Union. So I'd be concerned about that sort of thing happening with this. But it's funny that most of the people who are outraged at Kevin O'Leary for suggesting this, they love the European Union and are always saying we should be more like Europe. Well, now he's suggesting something like that. And because it's with the United States, while a Republican is going to be in the White House, they're outraged. It's not dissimilar to what I remember being in Washington with Stephen Harper. He went down to talk to Obama. They were trying to constantly find ways to keep the border open. And one of the things they talked about back then, and this was February 2011, was Fortress North America. This is an idea that keeps coming around. It takes on different forms. I think we'll hear more discussion about integrating in different ways, but I think the idea of us becoming a 51st state is just off the table.
I agree with you there. Brian, let's talk about that capital gains tax. It didn't pass through Parliament, yet the government wants to collect. Can you explain?
Yeah, a lot of people thought when Trudeau prorogued Parliament that meant the capital gains tax was dead because the Ways and Means motion did not pass. But I checked with the Canada Revenue Agency. They are going to continue to collect. And they say that it is standard parliamentary procedure and tradition that once a Ways and Means motion is tabled, not voted on, but tabled, that that is considered in effect. Now, this is strange because the capital gains inclusion proposal came in the budget, and then it was to be implemented and take effect on June 25th. The Ways and Means motion wasn't tabled until September 23rd of 2024. Just after that, of course, Parliament was seized with the Green Slush Fund scandal and no government business could move. And so the motion never passed, but CRA, in a very detailed email to me, explained that yes, they're going to continue doing this. If this government falls, are they still going to keep doing it? I find this going too far. I understand part of their reasoning for doing it, and they say it's about fairness so that everyone knows what the rules are, but they have not had this pass through the House of Commons. They have not, this goes against the whole issue of no taxation without representation. That's what happens here. I just think it's wrong.
Brian, many of the pollsters, as you and I've talked about in the past, have the Conservatives anywhere from 15 to 20 points, even above that over the Trudeau Liberals right now. Now, what about shoring up support by the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives in the ridings that have a lot of seats, specifically Ontario and Quebec. How's it looking for the Tories right now?
Several polls put the Conservatives polling right near 50% in Ontario. So, when you see a 20-point lead, it's not because they've run up the score in Alberta or Saskatchewan. They are going to dominate in Ontario. In Quebec, there have been several polls, including by Leger, which is based in Montreal. And because Quebec can be a bit different, a bit finicky, often people will look to a Quebec-based pollster to say, okay, are the other guys right? Is this going to be accurate? And the Conservatives are actually ahead of the Liberals. It goes the Bloc Québécois well out in front, and then the Conservatives are starting to poll at about 25% in that neighborhood. If they were to get 25% of the vote in Quebec, they would break through in places that they don't normally. The Conservative support in Quebec is really centered around Quebec City. That's the traditional Conservative heartland out there. Would they break through in Montreal? That would be tough to say, but perhaps south of Montreal and eastern townships. I know that the Conservatives would love to win in areas like Trois-Rivières or Three Rivers. They've got their eye on some places that they think they can win, but they're trying not to get too excited about polling showing them this eye, because it's happened before and then it hasn't delivered. So we'll see.
Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from beautiful Palm Springs, California.
Thank you.
The U.S. presidential election will be here very soon. And of course, here in Canada, we could see a federal election as well, because we currently have a minority government. Increasingly, we are hearing concerns about election integrity and potential election fraud. So joining me today from the Crow's Nest Pass area of Alberta is Fred Bradley. And many of you may remember Fred as the former MLA for Pincher Creek from 1975 through 1993. And he also served from 1995 to 2013 as a parliamentary development advisor in Ukraine, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan, which included advising on election integrity. So Fred, great to have you with us today. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Well, thank you very much. Very pleased to join you.
Okay, so Fred, what was your experience like in some of the foreign countries that we mentioned there? And to what degree did they experience attempts to manipulate the elections?
Well, my actual experience was in Ukraine in terms of election monitoring. And I monitored elections in 1998 parliamentary elections, the 2004 presidential election, and the 2012 parliamentary election. And over the period of time, I saw in my initial experience in 1998, there was certainly a lot of manipulation and fraud at the polling stations. But what I witnessed in 2004 during the presidential election was certainly very eye-opening, because I monitored the three rounds of the presidential election in 2004, and saw many different types of election fraud during that and manipulation of the vote. When we got to the 2012 parliamentary election, it was basically what we would call a fundamentally free and fair election. The processes, the results of the voting were accurate and portrayed the will of the people. But I saw some interesting things in 1998 in terms at polling stations. Obviously, manipulation by administrative resources being used to back the party of power's candidates in elections. Voting irregularities at election polling stations. But 2004 was really the ultimate experience in monitoring pervasive election fraud conducted by the administration of the political party and the administration, presidential administration in Ukraine, or their cohorts, and Russian interference was obviously a hallmark of that. I could go into some detail on that if you wanted me to, but there was things like carousel voting, where buses would roll up, and people would come out and go into polling stations and vote, and then go on to another polling station because their names were on multiple lists in multiple different polling stations, and that's how one way of influencing the vote. The other was disappearing ink, where if they knew a polling station was going to vote for an opposition candidate, they would have this disappearing ink pen, and when the ballots went to count, the ballots would not show the mark for the opposition candidate. And then there was actually in the second round experience where the one constituency we were monitored in, that at the end of the day, the polling commission had got so expert in what they were doing was they just reversed the results. So they reported that their favored candidate, which was the Russian-supported candidate, had won the election. They reversed the votes for the Yushchenko, who ultimately won the presidential election, but they just reversed the votes and filed them accordingly and said this was the result of the vote for this election commission in favor of the Yanukovych versus Yushchenko. So it was really a real eye-opener in terms of what can be done. But the use of administrative resources, the election commissions itself, the Central Election Commission, they had 1 million more people vote at the end of the day than had registered to vote during the election. So they just created all sorts of election. That was absolutely election fraud at a very high scale, which resulted in a third round of voting, the firing of the then Central Election Commission, which had perpetrated the fraud, and then had a fair and free election. The third round was absolutely different. They followed the procedures as laid out by the law, and they didn't have the interference that had taken place in the first election. That's basically the experience that I had witnessed in terms of election fraud.
So corrupt. Now, here in Canada and the US, there's been a lot of attention on foreign interference attempts from nations like China and Russia and Iran, among others. So what methods are hostile nations using to try to sway election results over here?
Well, there's all sorts of
it's gotten
and
more
I'm not
sophisticated, obviously, than the disappearing ink, right?
The game has changed incredibly. Social media is a big part of it.
Right.
Manipulating social media, fake news and propaganda, deep fakes and manipulated media. I mean, hacking into political parties' campaigns. This is happening in the United States, both currently in terms of Democratic and Republican attacks. They can target voting infrastructure. There's just, there's diplomatic and economic pressures that have been used. They can targeting influence operations, manipulation of traditional media sources with putting in wrong data out there, which is then reported, et cetera. So there's many different ways in which foreign actors can interfere in our elections. And then then they have their espionage and covert operations, and they will also exploit any loopholes they see in our electoral processes if they can do that. So there are many different ways in which that foreign interference and manipulation can take place, and both Russia and China have been big actors in that in the United States. Russia more in the United States, China here in Canada, in terms of some of the recent things we've seen.
Do we know, Fred, if any of these efforts have actually changed the outcome of an election?
It's really that is really difficult to determine. I mean, in very close targeted ridings, it may have an influence. I mean, there's been those allegations in Canadian elections, particularly I think in one in Vancouver. They've manipulated political parties. Have they actually affected the results? That's extremely difficult to assess. In a very close election, I mean, how do you influence public opinion? If through social media and influencers, you influence public opinion, how do you measure that? How do you actually show that that's had an effect on the results? So that's one aspect. And recently, I think we've seen in the United States where the Russians have just perfected their manipulation, where they actually are paying domestic social media influencers to put forward their propaganda pieces, which they promoted in RT and other sources. So they're actually paying Americans or Canadians to manipulate what is being what the information they want to target to voters in terms of trying to influence an election or public opinion. I mean, if you push certain stories which aren't true or there's partially true and just continue to push that with people, people generally after many periods of receiving information, they start to, even though they may know something is false, it becomes part of the psyche of what they believe or what they think is true.
Yeah, that's true. What changes do you think the federal government could put in place to make it a lot more difficult for other nations to interfere?
Well, we currently have a royal commission that's looking into that and was going to provide some advice on that. Obviously, whether it's direct foreign influence by embassies or staff of embassies, I think actions need to be taken. I think the idea of having a foreign registry, I think other countries have it, Great Britain, the United States, Australia, to ensure that these activities, these agents have to register. And maybe and our security services need to be perhaps given more resources to protect our electoral systems against this. Social media, how do you control that? We have the arguments of free speech versus actually putting out misinformation and misfacts. That's very difficult to control. And in cybersecurity, I think you have to look at also those aspects. So there's many different ways we can look at it, but it's extremely difficult to in this age and with artificial intelligence and the manipulation that can be done there. I mean, we've seen in the United States where there's fake videos out there now.
That is the scariest thing, like you were saying before, the
of a very prominent musician endorsing one candidate when she's actually come out and endorsed another candidate publicly last night. So
yeah. Oh, that is the scariest. Do you think that we need stricter voter verification rules, or, as some argue, would that discourage people from voting? Because, you know, you hear stories of like election poll stations where, like, Elections Canada surveyed election officers during the 2019 Canadian federal election, discovered that, what was it, 35% of polling staff sometimes or often encountered individuals asking to vote who were not on the list of electors and who were unable to be registered at the polling station. So should that maybe raise some red flags?
Well, you know, I think we have some very good election processes in Canada. Okay. So what happens at polling stations, and maybe this, you know, we used to have an enumeration list where we hire enumerators to go door to door in the first part of when we had longer election periods. So we decided we had to shorten the election period. There used to be 2 months federal elections because it gave time for hiring enumerators to go door to door to register voters. Those lists would be published. Then people could go to the list and have an opportunity to revise and have their name put on the list. But we don't do that anymore. It's compiled electronically based on provincial records or federal records, and they have a list. That list, so we shortened the election campaign to basically a 1 month campaign. So if your name isn't on the list, you have an opportunity prior to the election to have your name added to the list. And you go, it's usually an electronic process. The day of the election, people will show up, and what we require for verification, even you'll get a polling card, I think, from the federal government. But what we require when you go to vote is to show a photo ID, a government-issued piece of photo ID with your name and address on it, or 2 pieces of ID showing your name and address. And that's when people go to the poll. They expect they can go in and vote. They may not have their ID with them that verifies that. So, and their name may not be on the list. And that's where, you know, that's where the issue comes in. You go to the polling station and you haven't brought your ID with you, and people will say, "I'm not on the list," or "I can't vote because I don't have my ID." Yeah. So that's pretty strict. I mean, that's pretty strict identification of a voter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Photo ID or 2 pieces of government issued or something, a utility bill that has your name and address that proves that you are a resident in the place in which you are voting. That I think is the cause. But I do think, you know, those requirements are very very stringent to some degree. That you have to have these 2 pieces of ID to prove who you are. So it's very. I don't think you have people voting who aren't eligible to vote. It's people who may be disqualified because they can't prove their residency. Does that change the results of an election? I think those. And the other thing, if you don't have that information, if you have a voter, a friend, or someone goes with you who lives in you sign a sworn statement that I live in such and such a address, and you have a neighbor or a friend who comes and signs a sworn statement, yes, I know this person, I verify that they live at this address, they will put you on the list. So, I mean, that would be access to voting. Do all citizens have credible access to voting? And we have all sorts of procedures for absentee voting if you're out of the country, or if you are in a nursing home, or some incapacitated voting opportunities for people.
Right. Oh gosh, it looks like we're out of time here. But Fred, we appreciate you coming on today and sharing your knowledge with us, especially from the voting interference that you experienced in those other countries. So fascinating.
Well, it was certainly a fascinating experience for me, and a very interesting period of time in my life.
Absolutely. Fred Bradley is the former Alberta MLA and an overseas parliamentary development advisor. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.